I've simulated Football Manager 2024 1,000 years into the future, and it's fair to say some things have happened. Let's go and have a little look around the database, shall we? But first, loads of people have been asking if they can get their hands on this save file. So in order to simplify things as much as possible, and because it helps out the old YouTube algorithm as well, once this video hits 5,000 likes, I will release the save file. I'll put it in the description below. I'll put it as the pinned comment below. You'll be able to download it, look through it to your heart's content. Once you've done that, let us know interesting things you've found down in the comments section. But step one, like the video, 5,000 likes, I release the save file. Let's go and have a look around in it, shall we? And there we have our confirmation that it is the 15th of June, 3023, 1,000 years after the standard FM24 database begins. And this is a universe where everything is absolute madness. If we start off in the Premier League, it's like no Premier League I've ever seen before. Although, to be fair, Manchester City, still top four. In 1,000 years' time, Manchester City still top four in the Premier League. The only other current Premier League teams who are still there in 1,000 years, I've used a plural there and maybe I didn't need to. Bournemouth have won the Premier League in 1,000 years' time as a current Premier League team. And there are no others. It's Bournemouth and Manchester City as the sole survivors 1,000 years down the line. I'm pretty sure if you had to put money right now on which two Premier League teams would still be in the Premier League in 1,000 years, you probably wouldn't have picked Bournemouth as one of them. If we look through the past winners as well, obviously we've got 1,000 years of history here, so we're not going to be going through all of it. However, we have done a couple of previous videos in this series. We stopped off at 100 years, 250 years, 500 years. I'll link to all those videos down below. So there are a couple of ways to search in and look at the, oh my word, look at how many times Man City won in a row there. That's what, 40 straight Premier League titles. Yeah, as I was saying, there are a couple of opportunities to dip in and get a little bit more of a deep dive on some of the earlier years of this save. So for this video, we're going to be focusing on the last couple of 100 years, probably pushing as far as those last 500 years. But my word, Man City have had a couple of long periods of dominance from 2892 through to, what's that, 2981, 2982. So for a period, I mean, they even won a few more in there. There's basically a 100-year period there where City have won 85, 90 of the Premier Leagues available during that 100-year period. If you think the Premier League is getting predictable now in real life, just be glad you're not having to watch it in 800 years' time. Let's look at the records. As you can imagine, with that run we've just seen, Manchester City have won the Premier Leagues more times than anybody else. 285 Premier League wins. Actually, when we stopped in at 500 years in the future, Newcastle had won the Premier League more times than anybody else. Not only have Man City reclaimed the throne that I think they had at the 250-year point, Newcastle are now nowhere to be seen when it comes to the Premier League. Let's just check in and see where. So Newcastle have dropped down to the Championship and have now won 249. So it's only relatively recently that City have passed them, and they have won the title within the last 30 years or so, but they've certainly not had a period of dominance like they did from like the 200 to 400 year mark of this database. They were very much Newcastle's years. The other really notable thing about this Premier League table is just how many of them are current non-league teams. It's not just that there's been a few Championship and League One teams who've stepped up and taken their spot in the Premier League. It's almost as if the entire league structure has been turned on its head with so many non-league teams. I mean, Kings Lynn were there or thereabouts at the 500-year mark. So Kings Lynn are a team that have had, I mean, they've only won one Premier League in 1,000 years, but that doesn't tell the tale of success for a club like Kings Lynn, who very much are a non-league team in the present day, but are going to spend, I mean, okay, they had 100 years or so in non-league there, but they went all, okay, Kings Lynn went all the way up from non-league to the Premier League, back down to the National League North again for about 100 years, then made their way back. They've done a full-on Football Manager Road to Glory twice, organically, in a 1,000-year period. I mean, there's probably more stories like that within the database that I've not picked out. Kings Lynn are a notable one for me because they're one of my former non-league to legend starting clubs, but that kind of thing is bonkers. Let's have a look at the sort of stadiums that are being used in the Premier League in the future. Man City playing in the creatively named Man City Stadium. Middlesbrough playing in the Riverside, which is now over 1,000 years old. It is weird that some very few, select few clubs seem to get a new stadium, but so many of them are just playing in their old grounds from a gazillion years ago. What did Man City do to deserve the Man City Stadium, which was only built 2 years ago? So that is relatively new. That is, that's crazy. Let's look at the sponsorship income. Middlesbrough generating more sponsorship income than anyone else. And actually, Kings Lynn generating more sponsorship money than Manchester City. So Manchester City have done remarkably well to finish fourth, as they have the lowest sponsorship income in the Premier League. I imagine that's offset somewhat by having a massive stadium compared to all of their rivals. So obviously they've got more income coming in from that kind of thing. But it is weird that the club that's won the Premier League more times than any other club, including winning it most recently, 20, 25 years ago, have also, they haven't won the Champions League for over 400 years, but they're good at it just illustrates the fact that the English clubs really don't compete in Europe anymore. Let's look down the rest of the English pyramid as well, see what other interesting stuff we can find as we drop down. So if we look at the Championship, there we find Newcastle, who were previously very, very dominant. We're really looking for non-league clubs we don't expect to see, or big Premier League clubs that have had a fall from grace there. So there's Liverpool down there. That's always quite an interesting one to see where the likes of Liverpool end up. No sign so far of Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs. There's some big clubs who've had some big falls. Forest have appeared there winning the playoffs. There's Manchester United, 8th place in League One. Arsenal also down in League One. What stadiums are they playing in? So Old Trafford, the Emirates, the City Ground are still a thing. So they've still got these big stadiums in these lower leagues. Do they still fill them? If we have a look at last season's fixtures, can we get the lollujo view on so we can see attendances? They still get like 45, somewhere between 40 and 50,000 people turning up for League One matches, which is more than almost every team in the Premier League. Really indicating that matchday attendance makes absolutely no difference to the success of a football club in the future. I guess money is made from other areas. We can't see TV revenue on this kind of thing. In fact, we could probably, if we go into the rules of the Premier League and have a look at prize money. So prize money is not as significant as you would think the difference in those attendances are. Parachute payments still a thing. You can see parachute payments are in there. But they're just, I guess it's the difference between being successful in the Champions League or not. It doesn't really matter what kind of attendances you're getting in the English pyramid, because English teams just don't perform on that European scale. We looked at 500 years in the future. There's almost nobody in the current England squad back then who were playing for English teams. They weren't even coming through the youth systems at English teams. England is just a farmers league. There is lovely old Peterborough United, the club that I support, down in League Two, pretty much where we've historically been. What I haven't seen is Chelsea. I haven't seen Spurs. Where on earth have these ended up? We've only got the top 4 divisions loaded. So Chelsea are down in the National League, where they have been. For how long have they been down there? If we have a look at domestic leagues, they've just actually dipped down there. So Chelsea, they kind of potter in and out of it, but most recently they have just dipped down into the National League. And Spurs are also in the National League, and they, if we have a look at that, they spend a little bit more time there. So they've dropped down to, that's interesting that there they counted as National League South. That year they weren't entirely sure it was the National League North and South, so it looks like some years it's simulating these properly and other years it's just having, I don't know, did we not play it that year, lads? What happened? Obviously we are still on the beta of FM24, and the game isn't designed to go 1,000 years in the future. The further we go, the more glitchy, weird stuff like that happens, and we just put that down to glitchy, weird stuff. This is not what this game was ever intended to do. So if the Premier League is a farmers' league, what is the big league, I hear you ask? It's Scotland. Scotland's the big league. Scotland. It's Scotland. I can't express as an Englishman how sad I am but it is the Scottish League that is the big league. I mean, the sponsorship income up in Scotland is insane. The Inverary Locos, I've never heard of the Inverary Locos, but them finishing rock bottom of at least the sponsorship table in the Scottish Premiership gets them more than double the sponsorship income that Middlesbrough, was it Middlesbrough who were top of the Premier League when they only got 35 million in sponsorship? The worst team in the Scottish Premiership gets more than double that. There is no way England can compete with Scotland in this version of the future. There is your Scottish Premiership. We already know from 500 years in the future that it's not Rangers and Celtic who are leading this period of dominance either. If you look through the past winners, it was very much the story of Edinburgh City previously, and it looks like Peterhead and Arbroath have got involved as well. And there's a number of teams up in Scotland very, very capable of periods of dominance, of winning the league. If we have a look at past winners, so 279 times Arbroath have won the Scottish Premiership. They are the record holder for that. What kind of stadiums do we play in up here in Scotland? I mean, it's your old stadiums, your same old stadiums. Arbroath, who've won it a gazillion times, less than 10,000 people. Edinburgh City, where are they? Play in front of less than 3,000 people. It's mad. It's absolutely mad. But that seems to be enough for them to dominate and presumably continue to dominate in European competitions as well. So Arbroath, not only winning 279 Scottish Championships, they've won the Champions League 42 times. We'll get on to the Champions League a little bit later in the video. Now, I don't have all of these leagues loaded, so we can't go through all of these and see what's going on there. I only loaded the big five plus Scotland and Wales and Argentina and Brazil, just to basically, it's an English-speaking channel. Let's load the English-speaking leagues and also keep Argentina and Brazil in just to keep international competition as balanced as possible. But we're looking for current big five leagues. Spain are the highest ranked one, down in 15th place. Let's have a look to see what's going on in Spain. And in Spain, Barcelona have just won La Liga. So some things change and some things very much stay the same. Barcelona look like they're continuing to dominate. Real Madrid are still up there around about the place as well. If we look through the past winners, it is bonkers that there's so many years that it was B teams that won the league. That just, again, put it down to beta stuff, being far in the future stuff. The game gets glitchy the further in you go. Theoretically, B teams shouldn't be able to be promoted to La Liga, because they can't go up as high as their parent team. But I guess what's actually happened in these kind of scenarios is the parent teams have got relegated at the same time as the B teams have got promoted. So Granada are down in the Spanish non-league, and Granada B are up in the second division, despite the fact that Granada are still considered the senior affiliate. So they've kind of at some point swapped places. We've seen the same thing happen with Las Palmas, and there was a period of many years there where it was a B team winning La Liga, because it's mad. My word, that's a lot of B team dominance there in La Liga. Let's have a look at the records for most winners. The most successful team in the history of Spanish football is Granada's B team. Love it. Lovely old stuff. Let's find another league to look at. So we looked at Spain. We've looked at England. There you go. There's France directly below England. We'll have a quick look here because, they're barely holding on as one of the big five leagues in real life. Thanks mainly to Paris Saint-Germain, and Paris Saint-Germain are still there or thereabouts. If we have a look at the record holders here, Paris Saint-Germain have won more Ligue 1s than anybody else, but only 98 of them in 1,000 years, which really does suggest that the French league has very much shared these league titles around, because we've seen in the other leagues just how dominant certain teams become. Granada had won nearly half, or Granada B, have won nearly half of the La Ligas throughout the entire simulation. How many do Paris Saint-Germain already have in real life? They've added way below 10%, and that's more than any other team in France. So if you want competitive football where anybody can win, maybe France is the place to hang out in the deepest, darkest future. What else did we have loaded? Germany and Italy would be the other one. So there's Germany. Let's see what's going on in the Bundesliga. Again, you've got some of the bigger teams drifting towards the top of the pile here. It's not as weird as the Premier League. Bayern Munich in second, Borussia Dortmund in fourth, Schalke back up there, where they're supposed to be. I enjoyed my brief Schalke save a few years ago, but there's a lot of recognizable teams there in Bundesliga as far as I'm concerned. If you look through the past winners, there's lots of names that I know, which you don't necessarily expect. Certainly, I think if I was German and looking at that Premier League, I wouldn't necessarily know who all of the teams that had won that. And again, similar to in France, in Bundesliga, just 105 winning times one for Bayern Munich, which in real life, I mean, how many have they won in real life? Feels like they've been winning it 105 times in a row now. So they must have got, 20 of them? Before the simulation even started. So to only have won 80 to 90 Bundesligas during 1,000 years, and that's still to be the record for the country, it's an interesting place to play football. Really interesting as well. They didn't win the Champions League at all at any point in 1,000 years. Poor old German football, eh? Goodness me. And then quickly, a little look at Italy as well, if we can have a look at Serie A, AC Milan and Inter. Italian football is based in Milan, apparently, in the future, and they basically seem to be sharing it back and forth between them. Roma getting involved as well. If we have a look at the record holders, it is AC Milan, 258 times winners. And, I mean, how are we doing for sponsorship income over here? Still more than the Premier League. If you're at the top, Juventus getting £50 million, Carpi 86,000. There seems to be some inequality in the Italian leagues. So next up then is the Champions League. If we have a look at the past winners over here, you can see that Scotland very much represented in here. Peterhead, East Fife, are the names that immediately leap out to me. Also, we've got, I don't even, where's SJ? They're from Finland. They're from North, so Scandinavia, having a nice time. Finland again. So it's Sweden. So Scandinavia and Scotland seem to be where football in the future comes from. They're from Slovakia. But what I'm not seeing is any teams from England, any teams from the Big Five leagues, really. I.e. the Big Five leagues now, not the ones in the future. I'm looking for a Real Madrid or a Liverpool or, what you would consider to be a big team now, and they're just not there. Warren Point, a Northern Irish team winning the Champions League. English football definitely not faring very well in this simulation at all. Most times winners of the Champions League are Galatasaray with 84 wins. We can't look at the Turkish leagues. We don't have them loaded. What we can do, though, is... we can't even look at the competitions they've won. Why can't we look at the competitions they've won? Records. No, wouldn't it normally be in there? I don't know what I'm pressing. Okay. That's weird. So because the league's not loaded, we can't even see how many times they've won it. We just have to... I assume they've won the Turkish league a lot because they've won the Champions League as much as they have. Let's look at the Europa. Hold the phone, boys and girls. Look at some of these transfer fees. Highest transfer fee. This is just Galatasaray. The highest transfer fee Galatasaray have paid, 272 million for this guy about 500 years ago. He played for Penabont. They signed him from Penabont, who I managed on Twitch last year. That's amazing. We might just have to look at some of the transfers before this video is out as well, and just get an idea of how much players are being transferred for, what the record transfers are in each league as well, maybe. But if we look at the Europa League, we want records here. Most times winners are Lincoln off of Gibraltar. So again, Gibraltar, arguably bigger, more important league than England, because they've won a major European trophy more recently than anyone from England have. Phenomenal. Conference Conference League. I love this. There's going to be so many goodies for you lot to find when you've got time to actually sit and really go through this. That's interesting. The Conference League in 1,000 years, the team that has won it most has only won it 14 times. The lowest attendance in the history is Cowden Beef versus Birmingham that only 55 people turned up to. And I love that as well. But Schalke winning it most recently. Again, no teams from England anywhere to be seen on there either. Eastleigh, there you go. Eastleigh are the most recent team from England to win any kind of European competition, winning the Conference League about 30 years ago. Oh. So moving on to international football, we will get to transfers in a minute as well, but internationally, World Cup, our most recent World Cup winners are Indonesia. They've won 2 of the last 3. Mali have also got a World Cup as well. Wales have won it a few times recently, as have Iceland. In fact, it seems like there was a period where Iceland and Wales were just trading it back and forth between them. Mali getting involved again. England did manage to win a couple of World Cups in 29-30. So despite the English leagues being an absolute nightmare for a gazillion years, look how slow it is to click on stuff now. I have just clicked on England and we might have just crashed the entire game doing it. No, there you go. We have clicked on England. So despite England, the English leagues being trash, the international team is still ranked 14th in the world. But this is what I was saying before about how none of the players actually play for English teams. So if we look at their, how do we look at their club? We go to their general info. No, there is a way on here to show us. I mean, we could just, one moment, I'm going to figure out how we show their club that they play for. There we go. I was just about to pause and figured it out. So most of them don't play for English teams. There's a few at Bournemouth, but the majority of them are playing, okay, there are a few that are playing. There's one at Luton, there's 3 at Middlesbrough. So there are a few who are actually playing for English teams. But if you look at the top ones, none of them do, apart from Carl Rivers at Wealdstone, who are actually in the Premier League. But Ben Kirkwood, England's current best player, came through the youth team at Nîmes, went to Metz, then went to Edinburgh City. Manny Darch did come through at Torquay, went to Forest Green, went to Carlisle, but then, of course, was stolen away by the big clubs, first in Scotland and then in Wales. David Preston, coming through at Torquay, was that 2 from Torquay, went to Manchester City, but then, of course, they can't afford to keep a player if East Fife want them, and he's now gone to Shakhtar. And then Adam Hodges came through Amanford in Wales, then went to Arbroath, then went back to Wales with Haverfordwest, Ireland with Waterford, and is now in Saudi Arabia, where I assume there's lots of money still being thrown around in Saudi Arabia. I mean, if we look at the Saudi Arabian league, I can't look at it because it's not a league that's loaded, but I imagine there's quite a lot of money. Can we probably can't do what I'm trying to do. This would just show Saudi players, won't it, rather than players playing in Saudi Arabia. Let's look at most time World Cup winners. China with 38 is the most times World Cup winners. And if we look at the European Championships as well, European Championships, Iceland have won it most recently. And again, Iceland and Wales just trading titles back and forth between them. And Wales have won the Euros more times than anybody. 51 titles for Wales. Wales are currently ranked, if it wants to load up, and it is struggling. Wales are the number 1 ranked team in international football, but again, players very much shared around the leagues. The Welsh league itself is only considered the 30th best league in the world, so it's very much a case of Welsh players are great. The Welsh leagues maybe not. So this guy came through at Rangers and went to Galatasaray. This guy he did come through at Haverfordwest and has stayed there. Alex Jones came through at Peterhead in Scotland, went to Montrose, went to Kilmarnock. Adam Roberts, South Gower in Wales, but then went to Slovakia and then to Scotland. They all end up in Scotland eventually, don't they? Right, let's look at some transfers, because transfers, I mean, how would we, if we go back to the Premier League, I'm not quite sure how we can show transfers other than, I guess, looking at the record transfers that some teams have paid. Because if we click on here, it's just going to show the transfers that have happened most recently. I don't think there's any way to filter this to show the entire 1,000 years and look at what the most expensive transfer was. I guess we could look at the Premier League record. Is there a Premier League transfer record that the game keeps track of? It doesn't look like there is. If there is, I don't know where they hide that data. So I think we're going to have to do it on a club level. The logical club to do it with is Manchester City, because theoretically they've got loads of money. They've won the Premier League more times than anybody. So their transfer record is £245 million, which actually happened in 2038. So the crazy transfers happened quickly. And then apparently inflation hasn't really been a thing for hundreds of years, 1,000 years, effectively. Who's currently top of the Premier League? So Bournemouth. Their record not their managers, their record transfer fee, 153 million. So it looks like your big clubs are paying these kind of money. I mean, if Arbroath, it was Arbroath, wasn't it, who won the biggest league in the world more times than anybody up in Scotland, and their highest transfer fee, 224 million. But again, it was like 600-700 years ago now. So it looks like transfer fees can go up to about the £250 million mark organically, but then they don't continue to increase in time, which I think is probably what you'd expect. We're not expecting the game to factor in inflation. That would be bonkers. And then if we just have a quick look at who the best players in the world are, we're not going to click on them. I mean, we'll click on this one guy. We have attribute masking on, so it doesn't really help massively, but we can get an idea of who the best players in the world play for, what nationalities they are, who is producing the best players. I mean, if we have a look at the World Team of the Year, again, you can see the kind of makeup that the World Team of the Year has. Interesting that there are still representatives from Bournemouth in England, from Barcelona, even though these teams don't necessarily compete massively on an international scale. So I wonder how much their existing reputation has an impact on that even 1,000 years in the future. That would certainly be something to experiment with. But yeah, it looks like so that guy was Chinese. That guy is from Hong Kong, DR Congo, China, England. We have an English World Player of the Year who I bet didn't come through an English team, came through at TNS, and then he spent his entire career in Wales, Scotland, until now. He's finally signed for Ipswich at the age of 33 after playing over 100 times for England. Haverfordwest had a very good team there with English players in. Actually, no, he is Welsh. But Haverfordwest, 2 different Ballon d'Or winners, or Footballer of the Year isn't Ballon d'Or, is it? But it's basically the same thing. But yeah, this is Marlowe. That's got to be Brazilian. No, Marlowe is Chinese. Marlowe is Chinese and had a lovely career at Manchester City. So there we have it. And these are the kind of things that you lot can really rummage through and find interesting points on. Like I say, once we get 5,000 likes on the video, I will release a save file to you. Let me know any interesting stuff you find in the comments section. If we get enough interesting stuff together, I'll make a follow-up video that rather than me just going through it league by league, it'll be picking out all of the interesting little nuggets that you lot find when you're going through it as well. So make sure you leave a thumbs up on the video. It helps massively in the algorithm. And like I say, will be a big bonus towards getting the database released so that you can have a little play on it as well. Do take it with a pinch of salt. Remember, this has all been done on the beta. I've never gone 1,000 years in the future on the beta before. Last year's equivalent of this video didn't come out until December. So even if there are a few little glitchy, weird things, inconsistencies, you got to give a big thumbs up to Sports Interactive for it to be possible to do this as quick as it's been done this year, because last year it took a month. This year it's taken just over a week. So the game's definitely running faster. Let's see what weird stuff we can find in it though, folks. And if you've enjoyed that, please leave that thumbs up. Like I said before, subscribe to the channel for the follow-up video, plus all the other daily Football Manager content we release over here as well. And thank you very much for watching.